Welcome back to the Law&Crime Channel Network. I'm your host, Brian Buckmire. Now, we've got a few cases on the docket for today. Let's check them out. I'm joined here today with Jeffrey Paul, I believe a retired tactical captain. Thank you very much for coming and bringing your expertise to the show. We also have Ann Bremner via Skype. How are you doing, Ann?
Good morning. How are you?
Bremner, I apologize. Bremner,
okay.
I apologize.
No worries.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, Ann, I'll start with you. As we're listening to this Winslow case unfold, is there anything that sticks out to you as we're hearing Jane Doe number 1 and Jane Doe number 2 recount the events that led up to the horrid days that they had faced, or the alleged horrible days that they had faced, and also some identification issues that seem to be popping up as well?
Right. I think we've already talked about victim number 1 being a lot less strong of a witness than victim number 2. But what strikes me is that the pattern that's emerging, and that can be really compelling to a jury to hear that he does the same kinds of things over and over. But then one of the worst things that happened in this case is the misidentification, pointing to who she thinks the defendant is, but it's actually his lawyer. And that's a big ouch, and that was in the preliminary hearing. Yeah,
and I think it actually came back up again on cross-examination.
Yes.
I think the defense counsel kind of hammered it home in front of the jury.
Yes.
Of course, we can't see what the jury looks like, but it would have been interesting to see their reaction there. Jeff, as we're looking at this Winslow case as well, a lot of it comes down to the investigation, how information is collected and how it's then presented by the DA. How do you find this investigation was handled and how the information was collected?
You know, I think that it was handled properly. I think that, quite frankly, the proofs showed that Mr. Winslow is a predator who hunted down his prey. I think that the missteps or the things that have emerged with regards to identifications are issues that can be presented in any case. I do not think that will go towards reasonable doubt with the jury. I think when you look at the totality of the circumstances, you look at the number of victims, this is not a conspiracy case where all these women got together. Mr. Winslow has an issue. I think that he has an issue. You heard his defense attorney talk about people want things because he's famous. I think that fame, in his case, gave him the mindset that he had a sense of entitlement and do what he wanted to do with women, and he went and preyed upon the vulnerable, the elderly, and I think that he's going to ultimately be found guilty.
Yeah, I agree with you on all points in the investigation. I know oftentimes people watch trials or movies on TV and they think, well, in 30 minutes they'll be able to answer all the questions and put all the pieces together. But to your point, it might not all be pristine, but if you look at the totality of the circumstances, we do get that effect that he looks like a predator. Also, it looks like from the alleged victims that he seems to prey upon the homeless or the transient, and maybe that community that won't speak out.
Yeah, and I think that from his perspective, these are people that may not have credibility in his mind, that may not be believed. They're individuals. In the case of a hitchhiker, half the battle is getting people that you want to prey upon into your vehicle. Well, they're looking for a ride. So I think he uses all those things to his advantage. But when push comes to shove, I think that the jury will see through some of the missteps. And these victims are vulnerable, and this is a traumatic event that they've gone through. And I think that some of what they're experiencing is quite normal.
Yeah. I believe we have some of the testimony actually from Jane Doe number 1 when she took the stand. Let's take a listen to what she had to say. So there you have Jane Doe number 1 recounting, I think, pretty convincingly, and what's going on here. I know for cases like this, credibility of the alleged victim is always a major component. And do you think that the jury found her credible?
It seems like that, but what we didn't hear was some cross-examination about use of alcohol when she denied alcohol use. Generally, you should never say never, never say always. I always say it said as a prosecutor. But then she was impeached with some other incidents and arrests. But sure, she sounds very credible. She's very detailed. She's appropriate in her demeanor. And misidentification in the preliminary hearing being brought up on cross, you've got all of the other victims in this case saying it's the same guy, and that's strong for identification.
Yeah, and to your point, Anna, correct. The impeachment has a huge effect. And Jeffrey, I'll lay this to you. It appears that a lot of guests and hosts have said, maybe, if it was one case at a time, there's enough reasonable doubt that one might be able to see that he's not guilty, at least based on the standard of proof that's required. But when you put them all together, I mean, even if there's a little bit of issue here, a little bit of issue here, it seems like an open and shut case.
Yeah, I think exactly correct. I mean, I think if this was one case, one victim with no other data, a misidentification, and maybe a troubled past or something less than, a upstanding member of society, some would kind of question, well, what's this all about? Could this completely be wrong? But when you have all these victims with all these facts, the victims do not know each other. There's no conspiracy where people got together and said, let's frame him. I think you have normal missteps, and I think you have normal life experiences of these different victims coming from different places. And I think that it speaks to the overall volume of data that's going to send him down.
Yeah. Now, and sometimes we talk about, as defense attorneys and on this show, that sometimes it's not the trial in front of you that the defense is fighting, but sometimes it's the trial afterwards, the appeal. When I look at a case like this, and everyone seems to agree, maybe if it was just one, we would have found him not guilty. But I know that for some appeals, they have, well, if the judge had made the error of joining the cases together, and it's more likely that they were found guilty because one case prejudiced them all, or the multitude of them prejudiced them all, isn't that an appellate issue that might be brought up down the road, and maybe that's the true battle?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times you win the war, so to speak, in a trial, and you lose it on appeal. So you win the battle, then you lose the war on appeal. But the fact of the matter is, under Evidence Rule 404, 404B, the other bad acts or other acts would likely come in this case, even if the counts were severed. And so I think that it would be a harmless error analysis in the Court of Appeals, given that this all goes to identity, the other victims, the other crime evidence, also goes to a common scheme or plan, et cetera, lack of mistake in his intent. So that's the way I would analyze it as a prosecutor. But, there's always danger on appeal. We used to call it in the prosecutor's office, defending the redoubt. Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought the point of common scheme and plan, because I think that's basically what Jeff was getting at, and in probably like a less legal way of, he preys on the weak. He preys on these women, or they're accusing him of it at least, in this kind of way that it must be him, and therefore we must try all the cases together.
I think he thinks he's in the driver's seat with regards to being able to be in a position to do what he wants to do to those that he preys upon.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to follow the Winslow case. Now, we're not on live today. We're just going to be recapping as the case goes on, and we'll be covering the other cases for today. We'll check out more of this case and others after this break.